G'day guys, I've just returned from the Risky Rollers Open where I won 6 out of my 8 games running the World Eaters 30 Terminator list, hashtag 30nators. In today's video we're going to break down my list in detail as well as all of the lists of the people that I played against in this fantastic event. We're also going to break down each round in great detail, my opponent, the mission rules, the scores that were achieved, as well as breaking down the deployment type, the terrain layout, and talking about some of the strategies where I deployed my units and how the game unfolded. So we're going to share a lot of detail on the tactics and strategies that allowed me to win 6 out of 8 games. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the World Eaters 30 Terminator list, this video is for you. With that being said, let's get stuck into it.
Look for the blood god.
G'day guys, I wanted to thank the team from the Army Painter for sponsoring this channel and this video. The Army Painter are donating a Warpaints Fanatic flexible triad set for every tournament game that I win, and all you have to do to go in the running to win a set yourself is comment below with which colour you would like to win if your name was randomly selected. The Army Painter are then going to go through the comments section and select people at random and send out sets of these absolutely fantastic paints. If you'd like to browse their range, there are links in the description below for where you can look at all of the amazing paints that these guys have available, pick which ones you would like to receive if you were lucky enough, and then comment that below. That's all you got to do, nice and simple. Now let's get back into the video. Alrighty guys, let's start by talking a little bit about the event itself. So the Risky Rollers Open was Victoria's very first 3-day 8-round event. So this is a nice big event that not only tests your skills on the tabletop, but it also tests your endurance. Being able to play 8 games back to back is always a challenge. It was 3 games on the first day, 3 games on the next day, and then 2-day games on the final. The event was streamed as well, so I was on stream for 2 games, so I'll talk about those later in the video, and I'll also share links to those in the descriptions below. And I'm also planning to cut them and basically do my own commentary over those games and clip it down so that you don't have to watch the full 3 hours to get a full understanding of those games. So there's a bunch of content to come out from the Risky Rollers about those stream games, so that's fantastic as well. There was a total of 46 players signed up, so not necessarily one of the biggest events. However, we did have some really strong players. And one of the things about a smaller player size, but with strong players, means the probability of you versing a very strong player goes way up. You know, if you've got 500 players and only 20 players that are really competitive, then the chances of you having to verse those competitive players is relatively low. Whereas this event, we had 46 people and probably about 15 of them were really competitive. Probably 5 to 10 of them were like state level players, really strong players. So it was actually a relatively challenging event and really high average skill in the players at the event, which was absolutely fantastic to see. The Risky Rollers do an absolutely fantastic job of running events, so make sure to check them out. I'll chuck some links in the description for all of their sort of stuff. But that more or less sums up the event. It was using WTC terrain, using your standard Pariah Nexus missions, and yeah, with that being said, let's get stuck into each round and the results. So here you can see the placings from the event. You can see that we had Reese Cunningham in first place. He's a Team Australia member and he's one of the top players in Victoria by far. He's an absolute weapon, and you can see he went undefeated over those 8 rounds. Then we had Ben Cobra, who's one of the Team Victoria aspirants. He did really well with his Tyranids. And then in third place we have me on the World Eaters. So really strong podium there, and yeah, you can see there's all these players in here, some really fantastic big names in there. Matt Morrisoli's in there, Dylan Cowan was in there, Stuart Traynor was in there. There's quite a few renowned players in the local area. Some of the top players in the local community all attended this fantastic tournament. So yeah, that's the placings. Now let's get on to the rounds. Alright, let's have a look at the list that I ran, because this information is going to obviously help you understand each game and each round. So we'll go through that first. And the list that I ran at this event was actually just an exact one-to-one copy of my WTC list. So those of you who've been following my content on the WTC are going to have already heard all about this list. I've done plenty of videos breaking down the decisions on what went what, like what we put in the list and why, and how the list sort of functions. And one of the pieces of feedback that I've been getting a lot is that people are like, yeah, but that's a teams list. They wanted to see how well it performs in singles. And so that's what I've brought here for you today. I took it to a singles event and I got a 6-2 win record, which I'm pretty happy with. So it just goes to show that this list isn't necessarily exclusively a teams list. Yes, it was designed to play in a teams environment, but it is powerful enough that it can definitely exist outside of that teams ecosystem. It doesn't need to be protected. It doesn't need table pick. It's very, very versatile and very, very strong. So what is in the list for those of you who haven't been following my WTC stuff? It's a World Eaters list. You've got Khan the Betrayer as your warlord. You've got 3 units of 10 jackals with skull smashers, mauler chainblades, icons, all the bells and whistles. We've got 2 units of Khorne berserkers, 1 unit of 10 and 1 unit of 5. And Khan obviously goes in with the unit of 10, and then the unit of 5 is separate. We've got a Rhino, obviously Khan and his 10 berserkers go inside of that. We've got 2 units of regular 8-bound, not exalted. These guys have got the scout move built in, etc. And then we've got the meat of the list, which is 3 big units of 10 Terminators. 6 power fists and combi weapons, 2 guys with auto cannons and chain fists, and then 2 guys with twin accursed weapons in each unit. And that's the list, and I'll go through the details on how it is piloted throughout this video, so you'll get a few different examples. But in general, the way it works is that the jackals and the berserkers are your early trading pieces. You send them out, they bully things off central objectives, they kill your opponent's screening units, that sort of stuff, and that can be assisted with 8-bound if you're going up against somebody who has more chunky screens. But basically, that part of the list is designed to clear all your enemy screens, and then once all of the screens are gone and your opponent doesn't have the ability to stop you, you rapid ingress in Terminators and you go for charges, and you send Khan out and you get stuck in, and then basically you hit their quality with your quality, and hopefully you do enough damage to them that when they go to clap you back, they can't kill all 30 Terminators in that one turn, and that gives you another turn of hitting them, and by the time you've had 30 Terminators hit you twice, most people's armies are pretty much dead. So that's the general play, but it's a very, very adaptive army. Sometimes you deep strike 1 unit, sometimes you deep strike 2 units of Terminators, depending on your opponent. Sometimes you go in on turn 2, sometimes you'll save it till turn 3 or even turn 4. There's a lot of variation into the way that this list is played, and we'll go through that in detail. So that's the list. Now let's go into round 1. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Hi, I'm Dean Simbeck, President and CEO of Blog for the Blood God's exclusive high quality dice warehouse and emporium. Due to a shipping error, I'm currently overstocked with Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice, and I'm passing the savings on to you! Roll 9-inch charges, pass invulnerable saves, roll high for damage, and score lots of hits. Check out the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today. Alright, my round 1 opponent was Erina Bennett. So she was running the Hello Marta Adepta Sororitas, a really, really interesting list. So not the Bringers of Flame that most people bring with their sisters, but this sister's detachment had some really interesting tech that was really good into the World Eaters. So let's go through her list. She had a Canoness with the enhancement Saintly Example, and I believe that this Canoness was basically she could get resurrected, and she had some damage buffs that she did, but basically she's relatively cheap. She's only 60 points. She's a throwaway character that can get resurrected, which is a real problem for things like World Eaters because we do all of our damage in a single phase. So we go in, we kill her, she gets resurrected at the end of the phase, and then we don't have any more attacks. Whereas more diverse armies can like shoot her dead, and then when she gets back up at the end of the shooting phase, charge her and kill her in the fight phase. Whereas World Eaters sort of struggle with that sort of thing. So the Canoness was really interesting. She had Junith, she had Morven Val, she had Saint Celestine and the Triumph of Saint Catherine. Then she had a Battle Sister Squad 2 immolators with multi-melters. Oh, sorry, one with multi-melters, one with flamers. What else did she have? She had 3 units of 3 arco-flagellants, which were quite interesting. And then she had 3 castigators. She had 2 of them with battle cannons and 1 of them with auto cannons. And then she had the big Paragon Warsuit unit, which obviously Morvenn Vahl attaches to, and the Penitent Engine. So really, really cool Sisters of Battle list. Let's jump over and have a look at the scores. Right, so this is the scores. So the mission that we played was Linchpin, and the mission rule was Raise Banners. And the score in the end was a 97-37 win to me, so quite a big win. As you can see, looking down here at the scoreboard, I almost maxed my primary, and I maxed out my secondaries, so really, really strong scoring on my side. Whereas unfortunately for Erina, she struggled to score those primary points. She was just getting 3 points per turn. She didn't raise a great deal of banners, and her secondaries were not amazing. So it was a really interesting game. There was a lot of moments during the game, which we'll go through in a second, where it sort of felt like it could swing either way, but they just continually were swinging in my favor. Let's have a look at the map here. So this is the map that we played on. It was Search and Destroy deployment. So I was deployed up here, she was deployed down there. And basically what happened was I deployed Terminators in behind this ruin here, Terminators behind this ruin here, I had a Rhino on the table. And then this 3rd unit Terminators in Deep Strike. And then she basically, knowing that I had 8-bound right up here on the corner and right up here on the corner, and the idea was that the 8-bound would either, if I got first turn, be able to scout forward, go in and do their damage, or if I got the second turn, they'd be able to scout back into safety. She knew that she had to deploy relatively safe and cagey. She couldn't present her castigators and just let me, kill them and tie them up with the 8-bound. So she deployed relatively conservatively, right, back in her deployment zone as well. But she did have the arco-flagellants ready to launch out onto those midfield objectives. She got the first turn, and then what she did is she basically threw arco-flagellants onto this objective, and this objective, so that she was in a position where she could start scoring those primary points. However, this was probably one of her mistakes, because as a result, I then launched out Jackals that were hiding up here, were able to charge this unit on this objective. Khorne Berserkers were able to charge this unit in the middle, and more Jackals were able to charge the unit down the bottom here. And as a result, I was able to pick up all of those units, and those units of 3, even though they're relatively cheap throwaway units that are relatively expendable, what that did is that meant that she didn't have any disposable units that she could use to protect her vehicles. She had the Battle Sisters back here on the home objective, and she just lost all of those. So now all she really had was tanks. And then in her turn, she basically moved up some tanks to get into objectives, to get in firing lines, etc. I was able to rapid ingress my Terminators into somewhere where they weren't able to be shot. And then we ticked over into my next turn. I had Advance and Charge active, and I basically went, okay, these Terminators that Deep Strike back here, they're going to charge and hit one Castigator. Then these Terminators are over here, they're going to charge into the middle and hit another Castigator. And basically I took out a serious amount of her damage in that second turn. She then responded by bringing Morvenn Vahl on, and Morvenn Vahl's unit was able to go in and more or less kill a Terminator unit, which is really devastating. But at that point, she now only had a single Castigator, and then I was able to turn Khan's unit and another Terminator unit on Morvenn's unit and kill it. And as a result, she's now basically got a single Castigator and a few little throwaway pieces to try to deal with 2 Terminator units and Khan's unit, which just wasn't enough. As a result, she was never really able to hold any of those midfield objectives, which is why she was getting those consistent 3 victory points for the primary. And I was able to basically just dominate. She didn't have anything that could charge me and push me off of those objectives, because a lot of her remaining units were things like vehicles or like Sisters with bolt guns. They don't really want to be charging 8-bound. So if I've got a unit of 8-bound sitting on an objective, there was no real effective way for her to deal with them. Which is why I ran away with the score, and I was able to just do my secondaries when I draw containment or whatever. I'm able to just do it because I've got so many units left alive, and she doesn't really have the damage output to push me off of anything, so I'm recovering assets, I'm sabotaging, and it sort of ran away. So yeah, I think the main mistake that she made was sacrificing her screens, and also there was one moment in the game where she basically left a hole up here in this top objective where I was able to rapid ingress my Terminators, and then those Terminators were able to come out and do their damage. She did have Celestine and her Canoness in reserves, and on that turn she had like a Castigator was like back here somewhere, and then she had some other stuff, bits and pieces around here, and knowing that I was going to rapid ingress there, she basically brought her Canoness on up in this corner, and then she brought Celestine's unit on here, so that if the Terminators went to charge the unit that was on this objective, the Celestine's unit would be able to heroically intervene. Was what she should have done is just put Celestine's unit up here, and then I wouldn't have been able to deep strike there in the first place. So a few small misplays like that, and that's one of the things the World Eaters Terminator list does probably better than anything else, is if your opponent makes a misplay and you're able to get a unit of 10 Terminators somewhere where they don't want you to have them, you can absolutely demolish people. And that's, I guess, a tale of what happened in this game. So, yeah, really interesting game. Score in the end, 97-37. Very happy with those results. Erina was an absolutely fantastic opponent. We had a good laugh. We had a lot of fun. So, yeah, I look forward to playing her again if I get paired into her at an upcoming event. But that's round 1 of 8 out of the way with a big win for the World Eaters. Alrighty, let's have a look at my round 2 opponent, Xavier Rainbow, and his Tau Empire Retaliation Cadre list. So he had Commander Farsight, he had a Cold Star with a Star Flare ignition system. He had another Cold Star with a prototype weapons system. He had a unit of Breaches, a unit of 10, inside of a Devilfish. Really, really cool combo there. They pair well together. And then he had a whole ton of Crisis battle suits. So he had a unit of Fire Knife, 3 units of Fire Knives, which are the ones with the plasma guns. Then he had 1 unit of Star Scythe, which are the ones with the Flamers. And then he had a unit of Sunforge as well, which are the ones with the fusion. Then he had a Pathfinder team, and then the scary part for Terminators is he had 3 Riptide battle suits. And then he rounded the list off with 3 units of drones. So, really, really cool list, really terrifying. He's got lots of screening elements, he's got lots of damage dealing elements, he's got those big Riptides which are really hard to get to and really, really scary for 3 wound Terminators when they overcharge and go to 4 damage, because that puts you, even with your Feel No Pains, the Terminators really, really do not want to get hit by 4 damage shooting. So a very cool list, and Xavier is a good friend of mine, and yeah, we had a really fantastic game. Let's have a look at the results. Alright, so here's the results from round 2 into Tau Empire. Our mission was Purge the Foe, and our mission rule was Smoke and Mirrors, and as you can see here, I got the 100-point win into Xavier's 39 points. Now, Purge the Foe is worth noting that this is one of those missions where going second is a massive advantage, and I managed to get the second turn. And basically what I did is I just made sure that in my first turn, I presented him with no valid targets, so he couldn't get a kill 1 on the first turn. And then basically what I would do is I would just make sure that every time I send out 1 unit, it kills 2. And then in response, he can kill that 1 unit, but I've only exposed 1, so I've only sent out 1 unit. So he can only really kill 1 in return, and then in my turn, I send out 1 more to go and kill 2 more units. And basically, if you do it that way, you're always going to get the kill 1, and you're always going to get the kill more. And if you're doing that, and you're also getting a hold 1 every turn, you're going to be scoring a minimum of 12 primary every single turn, and it's really hard for your opponent to stop you from doing that. And as a result, you end up sort of running away with it if you get the second turn. Whereas if you get the first turn, it's much, much more difficult because you need to predict what your opponent's going to be able to kill, and it can become quite messy. So yeah, as you can see, I maxed out my primary. and I also maxed out my secondary, largely facilitated by some really, really awesome draws. Like I got extend battle lines and containment in the first battle round. So all I had to do was, cool, jackals, they go contain that side, other jackals go contain that side, and then the berserkers go and charge pathfinders off the middle objective, which gets me my extend battle lines. And basically I've presented no valid targets outside of a unit of berserkers that I don't really care if he kills at this point, and I've just scored 11 victory points in the first turn. So really, really strong opening. He did get the same cards in his opening, but you can see the wheels definitely fell off for him after that first battle round, where he was getting no cards, whereas I was getting 7 or more victory points out of my secondary cards every turn. So yeah, massive win for me. Let's have a look at the map. So we played on Tipping Point, so that's the one where you've got the sort of Tetris looking shaped deployment, and as you can see, the terrain was quite heavy on this one. Now this map here is actually a map that we had designed the 30nator list to optimize on. So we designed it so basically you deploy in here and there's nowhere your opponent can go to shoot you turn one. So I've got a Rhino in here, I've got Terminators in here, I've got Terminators down here, like that's the idea. In this game, because it was into Tau, I decided to deep strike 2 units of Terminators. So I basically just had the Terminators and Khan in this one, and I had Jackals and Berserkers over in this one. And then basically what Xavier did is he basically sent out Pathfinders to try to screen me out, and the Stealth Suits to try to screen me out. I was able to trade Jackals for those. He had Riptides deployed back here, and almost all of his suits in Deep Strike. He had one unit that has Uppy Downy, and he had that deployed on the table. But basically, yeah, he had everything hidden, I had everything hidden. He put out some small pieces in his first turn. I was then able to send out Berserkers to kill a couple of things to get me that kill more. Then he responded by sort of presenting things. However, unfortunately for him, he left a nice big area up the top here where I could fit Terminators. So I decided not to rapid ingress them. Instead, I decided to just deep strike both of them and go for the 9-inch charges on them, because I wanted to bring their shooting to bear, and I needed the CP in my turn and his turn to auto advance 6 to get onto the objective to kill him off of it. And then I also wanted to sticky the objective when he shot the Berserkers and killed them, right? So as a result, I didn't have the CP for a rapid ingress. So I was like, it's fine, I'll just drop them there, and I'll basically, on turn 2, I'll have 2 units of Terminators in his backfield, I'll send one out into the middle, I'll send Khan's units out, and now, yeah, they're all out in the open, and if I fail those charges, it's not great because they're out in the open. However, he's not killing all 30 of them in one turn, So basically what happened is Khan's unit came out, hit the Riptide that was down here, dropped the 2 units of Terminators, and then one of them happened to rip that 9-inch charge straight from Deep Strike into one of the big Riptides. And as a result, I'd removed 2 Riptides, all of his Stealth Suits, all of his Pathfinders, and basically he had 1 Riptide left, and then all of his Deep Striking units. He dropped the Deep Striking units to try to deal with me. Unfortunately, he more or less bounced off of my armor, and then I was able to, in response, chase him down and kill him. And basically by turn 3, he'd more or less been tabled, and I still had a ludicrous amount of Terminators left on the table. So it was an absolute bloodbath. I think the only unit that he actually killed was that unit of 5 Berserkers from the first battle round. I'm pretty sure from there on out, he was just chipping away at units. He was trying to focus fire them down, but he'd shoot the Terminators, he'd get like 6 of them would die, but then those remaining 4 would just charge into a battlesuit unit and rip it apart. And then they would run off and hide somewhere now that there's only 3 or 4 of them left, and he just didn't have the ability to chase them and finish the job. And as a result, he didn't really kill that many of my units, which on Purge the Foe is a big problem. So this list functions really, really well in Purge the Foe because it doesn't really present with many easy, soft targets. Most of the things that it presents are quite durable and tough. And that's why if we have another look at the scores, you can see that he stopped scoring his primary pretty much from that third turn onwards. That was the last time that he held his home. And you can see he just had nothing left to secure those objectives. So yeah, absolutely blood-soaked game. But it was a kind of a perfect storm for me. This map is perfect for 30nators because you've got plenty of places you can hide, especially when you're versing something like Tau. And then also, I've had plenty of reps into Tau. I've practiced into it. We've designed the list to be able to beat it. And this mission is really, really good for me into Tau because I'm able to dictate what dies and when. So all of those things combined is what resulted in that big 100 to 39 point win. So yeah, great game. Xavier's an absolutely fantastic bloke. I have all the time in the world for him. We had a good laugh, but unfortunately for him, the Tau were not loving it on that day. So yeah, that's round 2 done and dusted. Alrighty guys, let's have a look at my round 3 opponent. So this was Ed Askey, who's actually one of the members of Risky Rollers and also one of the members of Team Victoria. He's an absolutely fantastic guy. I've got all the time in the world for Ed, and he was also running the Tau Empire. So his list was slightly different. It was also a retaliation cadre, however. He had Farsight, he had Cold Star in with the internal grenade racks. Then he had another Cold Star with the Star Flare ignition system. Then he had an Enforcer battlesuit, which is really interesting. He gives Armor of Contempt to the unit. Then he had Fire Knife units, Star Scythe units, lots and lots of Crisis units. So the Fire Knife, Star Scythe, Star Scythe, Star Scythe, Sunforge, Sunforge. Then he had a Ghost Keel and a couple of Hammerheads. So this was the main area where his list differed from Xavier's. Was he had the Hammerheads, the Ghost Keel, he had some Kroot, and he had Piranhas, and then the obligatory 3 units of stealth suits. And then he also had a unit of Vespid. So it was a little bit of a different list. There was a few elements changed. Mostly these were tech pieces, and I had to talk to Ed about this, and basically they were tech pieces for more mission control, more scoring, like with the Kroot and the Vespid. And then also those Hammerheads were just so that if you got into like Chaos Knights or somebody like that with a lot of really tough mech, he'd be able to just go, cool, I'm just going to one-shot them every time they come out. Whereas the problem with you go with the Riptides, you've got a lot of 3 and 4 damage shooting. It can be really hard to chew through those heavier targets. Whereas this way, if his opponent has a Land Raider, his opponent has to hide. He can't bring the Land Raider out. So yeah, that was Ed's list. Really, really cool list. I really like the Cold Star with the grenade racks. He can essentially do 3 grenade strats in a single turn, because basically every time he moves over a unit, he can essentially do grenades to him. And then, so he can move over them, drop grenades. Then in the shooting phase, he can do grenades to them. Then when he shoots, he can use after he shoots, he can move again and move over you and drop more grenades. So he can do a ridiculous amount of mortal wounds, which was something that I was a little bit scared of. Yeah, really, really cool list. Let's have a look at the scoreboard. Alright, here's the scoreboard. So our mission was take and hold, and our mission rule was raising banners. And as you can see, this was a 95 to 45. So not quite as strong as in Xavier, but again, a really, really strong showing for the World Eaters. And having come off just versing this, I was, in killing Tau suits mode, which was really, really good. Being the 3rd game of the day, I was a little tired, so was Ed. However, I'd literally just played more or less this exact game and absolutely ran through it. So I was pretty confident going into this, although Ed is a very good player, so I was like, he may pull some tricks that I'm not expecting. But as you can see, looking at the scores, I nearly maxed my primary and I did max my secondaries, so a really, really strong showing there. Whereas unfortunately, Ed really struggled to score those primary points, and even his secondaries, he was struggling to score those points. This is one of the consistent themes I find in the World Eaters vs Tau matchup. Because a lot of their damage is in shooting, it's really easy for us to sticky an objective when we die and then score that primary for the rest of the game, and your opponent can't really stop you. It's really, really hard. And also, they're going to really struggle to hold primary, because it means they have to get out into the middle, get on those objectives, and that's exactly where the World Eaters player wants you. They want you in the middle, they want you out in the open so that they can charge you. So it's a really bad matchup for the Tau, and yeah, I was able to sort of leverage it. So let's have a look at the map. This is the map here. So as you can see, it's the exact same map as the previous round. They did this back-to-back to save the TOs, because one of the beautiful things about a Risky Rollers event is the TOs actually set up the tables for you. So while in between the games, while everyone's having their break, the TOs run around and set up all the tables. And one of the ways that they minimize the amount of work that they have to do is they basically put similar tables next to each other in the rounds. So yeah, same table, which meant I was able to more or less do the exact same thing. I deployed in safe behind here. This time I put Terminators in behind this one, Khan in behind that one, and 2 units in Deep Strike. Ed was much better with his screening. He didn't let me drop Terminators in behind him. However, one of the beautiful things about World Eaters vs. Tau is once you've removed those front screens, you actually don't need to get behind them. You can just drop in front of them and hit them. So he's got his suits and stuff around, and then basically it was a trading game in the middle. There was one point where I was able to get a unit of 3 8-bound to charge his home on turn 2. I think turn 1 I moved him up into the corner of the ruin here. And then on that second or that third turn, I was able to basically advance and charge and just yeet them in and charge some suits that were in here and then pile in onto the objective. And then he had this unit in his deployment zone he had to deal with, which it was only a unit of 3 8-bound, not the most scary thing in the world, but it was a problem that he had to solve, which, is annoying. So yeah, that was really good, but again, this was more or less the same as the previous round, where the priority is just take away their screens, take away those units that they want to use to achieve objectives, and now when they draw containment, do they really want one of their fire knife units that's supposed to be killing Terminators? Do they really want that doing cleanse? Do they really want that doing containment? Do they really want that doing sabotage? Probably not. They need that damage. And because I'd killed his Kroot, because I'd killed his, Pathfinders, because I'd killed the stealth suits, because I'd killed the Vespid, he kind of just didn't have, the pieces required to really do anything. And as a result, I just sort of ran away with the win. He did play it really well, but unfortunately, it's just such a good matchup, particularly on this table. I don't think there's a massive amount that Ed could have done differently to secure a win, because I can just hide from him all game. He has got the 3-inch deep strike, but he can only do that on 1 unit, and if he basically does that, he's going to drop down, he's going to shoot, he's going to do, kill 3 or 4 Terminators, and then the remaining 6 just pick him up, right? So in order to take out the Terminator units, you need to focus fire your whole army, and I can basically position them where you'll never be able to see 1 unit with your whole army, and that's why this matchup is so good for the World Eaters Terminators. Whereas if the World Eaters list had 8-bound in it, it's a very different story, because he can drop down, and if he shoots a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound, if he kills 4 or 5 of them, and there's only 1 or 2 left, those 1 or 2 are not going to kill an entire suit unit. Whereas if he kills 4 or 5 Terminators, the remaining 5 Terminators will kill an entire suit unit. And that's why it's a really critical break point, and it's really important that those 10-man Terminator units exist, because they are so much tougher, especially when they're in cover and your opponent doesn't have, he can't draw line of sight on me to mark me, to take away my cover, because he's got, too few units at this point. When you get into a point like that, you really do realize how powerful the durability of those Terminators is, because it means that you get to keep the unit even after your opponent hits it, as opposed to the 8-bound, where often your opponent hits the unit and now it's gone. So yeah, that's where we're at with the Tau matchup. So just reiterating those scores, it was a 95-45 my way against Ed's Tau, and yeah, as you can see, he was getting really rough. You get cleanse and containment in the 1 turn was a rough turn for him, because he's not going to be able, he can't do that many actions, he had to do things like establishing locus and stuff like that, which is stuff that he wants to be using his units to damage me. He can't be affording that, so that sort of really slowed Ed down, and the fact that he wasn't able to control any of the primary because I'd just kill him off of it was also a big problem for Ed. So all in all, great game. Ed's a lovely guy, and unfortunately for him, the World Eaters just have a massive advantage in that matchup.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 10th edition Warhammer 40k. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.
Alrighty, let's have a look at round 4. This time I'm playing into Dylan Cowan and his Dark Angels. Now Dylan is a Team Victoria player. He was one of the stronger players at the event, and he was also running Dark Angels, which is one of the harder matchups for the World Eaters. So we've got Space Marines, Dark Angels, Gladius Task Force. He has Azrael. He also has a Judicia with Artificer Armor, which is really cool. He had a unit of Assault Intercessors with jump packs. He had a Ballistus Dreadnought. Then he had 2 units of Deathwing Knights, the big units with 5 guys. He had a big unit of Hellblasters that he attached Azrael to. He had a unit of Inceptors with bolt weapons. He had a unit of Inner Circle Companions, and this is where his Judicia went. So this is a big unit of Scary Fights First guys. And then he had 3 Scout Squads as his screens, and 2 Vindicators for dealing that heavy damage. So this was a list I was actually terrified of, not only because Dylan is one of the top players in the state, but also because his Terminators kind of beat my Terminators because they have neg 1 damage inbuilt, whereas I have to spend command points in order to access that neg 1 damage, so that was really hard. He can also Armor of Contempt, which is a real big problem for me, so even though his Terminator units are only units of 5, mine are unit of 10, his are probably more than twice as durable as mine. So that was really concerning. He also had Azrael and those Hellblasters, and they can delete Terminator units like it's nobody's business. Those 2 damage shooting weapons are actually really good into the Terminators because they're going to be doing, every second hit is 4 damage, and the Feel No Pain just really doesn't help out there. The Feel No Pain on 3 wound models is really good when getting hit by 3 damage attacks. It's not so great when getting hit by 2 damage attacks. And because this is a shooting attack, I can't use the World Eater strat to neg 1 the damage. So these guys are a really effective way of killing Terminators. The Deathwing Knights are a really good effective way of countering the Terminators. And then the Judicia with the Inner Circle Companions has Fights First, which is a problem for World Eaters. And they're also really good at killing Terminators. So all in all, it was a relatively scary matchup, and then those 2 Vindicators as well, they do work into Terminators because they're a unit of 10, so they get Blast, and they're, really high damage, really high strength, so they're easily wounding me, they're easily putting enough damage on me that my Feel No Pain is not going to save Terminators. Yeah, this list terrified me, but let's have a look at the scores. Alright, so we played Take and Hold again. This time the mission was Prepared Positions. And it was a 75-77 loss. So I lost to Dylan, but it was only by 2 points, and it all came down to a really, really spicy combat at the end of the game. As you can see, looking at the scores here, I had him pipped on primary. I was 45 out of my 50 primary, whereas he only had 35, so I was controlling the table for the majority of the game. I really did struggle to score secondaries, and this was primarily because things like containment, I needed to be doing all the damage with my units. I couldn't afford to have units of Terminators doing actions, and I had to utilize my Berserkers and my Jackals to clear his screens early in the game, which meant I didn't have those units for doing actions later in the game. So that was a challenge, which is why you'll see here like Established Locust didn't score, Containment didn't score, and then also I was getting some really hard draws like Assassination when I'd killed a couple of his characters already, and the ones that remained were really, really hard to get to. So as a result, it was like, well, if I had drawn Assassination a turn earlier, or 2 turns earlier, I probably would have been fine. But drawing it at the time that I drew it was very, very difficult to achieve. And also, drawing things like Overwhelming Force late in the game is also really hard, because often early in the game, your opponent puts out their relatively easy to kill stuff on objectives, whereas late in the game, chances are, the units that they have left, the reason they have them left is because they're fucking hard to kill. And also, your army has taken attrition as well, and as a result, you're less able to kill those things that are fucking hard to kill. So, that's where the wheels fell off for me, was just my secondary play. I wasn't able to score it, which you can see he scored 32 out of his 40. He was smashing the secondaries, which was really, really good for him. The map we played on was a Hammer and Anvil, which is a deployment type that I'm not particularly fond of. And basically what I did here is I was on this side, he was on that side. I deployed basically behind this ruin here, because you can see that from here, he's not going to be able to shoot me much. It was really hard, because if I deployed anything up in this corner, he would be able to basically, from here, get his guys out and shoot down that path. So I was like, I can't go there, so I basically put Terminators and Khan in here. I think I put the Rhino in that nook, and then the Terminators behind the wall. And all he did was just put Azrael's unit on this side, and now it's like, well, the Khan's unit wants to kill Azrael, and I kind of want to use my Terminators into his Terminators, even though that's not a great pairing. Khan's unit is rubbish into those Terminators, because he just puts AOC on, and now all those Berserkers are hitting 2-up saves, and they just do no work, right? So I was like, I need to send Khan into the Hellblasters with Azrael, and I need to send the Terminators in and just bog him down. And my plan was, cool, if there's a Terminator on Terminator fight happening in the middle, I have 10 of them, he has 5, I have more OC on the objective, I'll just win it that way. But he was very smart, and he deployed counter to what I'd wanted. Early turn, he sent out scouts to do secondaries and stuff. I was able to trade with Jackals and Berserkers on his scouts, and start the game the same opening that I almost always do. But then basically there was one point in the game, and the whole time I was like, I'm behind. I'm not winning this game. Like, there's no way. Because he was getting all the good cards, he was getting the good primary, I was struggling, and I was losing a lot of my stuff along the way, and I was like, this is going horribly. But there was one point where he basically, I put a unit of Jackals up on this central objective at the top, and he needed to shoot them off, and he had Azrael's unit here that was set up so that it was screening out a Terminator drop. So he was using Azrael's unit to basically make it so that I couldn't drop in behind him. So he had like Azrael here, he had his inner circle companions up here, and then he had scouts behind. So basically the Terminators couldn't come on this side. But then he realized he needed to kill these Jackals, so he moved Azrael's unit from here down to here, so that he could see along that line and could see the Jackals. And as a result, he opened up this side of the board for me to deep strike into. And he didn't see that coming. So then basically what happened is I knew that this was going to be a Hail Mary. I didn't have the CP for a rapid ingress, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to rip a 9-inch charge. So it was a Hail Mary. I knew that if this went badly, it was going to be a blowout and I was going to get destroyed. But I knew that I was in a losing position anyway. So given that I just need to get points, because it, in singles events, it's win or lose. It doesn't matter how close you got. I was like, okay, cool. So I just put the Terminators here. He freaked out because he's like realized the disaster that he's made by leaving that opening. So he then, in response, rapid ingressed his remaining unit of Terminators in with Azrael's unit, so that when I charged Azrael, he could heroically intervene with the Terminators and keep me locked in combat there, which I was actually fine with. So I've dropped there. Now all of his Terminators are on, which means Khan's unit can come out. The Terminators that were hiding back here can come out because I now know where he is. He's got 2 units of Terminators over on this side of the board. And that unit made the 9-inch charge from Deep Strike. I allocated almost all of my attacks on Azrael's unit, knowing that I'm not going to kill many of his Terminators. So I put as many attacks as possible, pretty much obliterated Azrael's unit. Then when he fought into me, I put -1 damage on, and as a result, he didn't really kill many of my Terminators. Then we went over into his turn. He failed the Battle Shock test on Azrael's unit, and then he went to fall back with them so that they wouldn't get eaten by Terminators in the subsequent turn. And when he did the Desperate Escape check, he failed like 4 out of 5. And as a result, the rest of the Hellblaster unit disappeared in his movement phase, which was fantastic for me, because it was like, cool, that's one very scary piece removed from the board. And now I've got 30 Terminators, he has 10 Terminators. Surely I can win that, right? Turns out the answer is no. The Vindicators were popping off and just ripping through Terminators. Azrael, with his devastating wounds on his gun, was ripping through Terminators. Even the Dreadnought was shooting and killing 2 or 3 Terminators a turn. Like, I was getting some bad luck, but I also had some fortunate luck, so I'm not going to say I got diced. Like, it was what it was. There was one point where Khan's unit charged and spent 3 turns in combat with one of his Terminator units, where I'd killed like 1, and then he'd fight back and kill like 6 Berserkers, and then the next turn I'd kill like 1 more, and then he fought back and killed everybody except for Khan. And then I decided to just leave Khan in combat for the next turn, knowing that he was going to get to fight first. But if he fights and kills Khan, Khan's going to fight on death and kill the remaining Terminators. He fought, failed to kill Khan. Khan fought, failed to kill the remaining Terminators. So it was just this never-ending combat of Khan versus Terminators down here. And then basically it all ended out on the last turn. I drew Recover Assets and Assassination, but I had to take him off of a primary, if I'm remembering correctly. But basically it all boiled down to there was a Dreadnought on this objective here, and if I killed that Dreadnought, I'd win the game. And I threw 6 Terminators into it and failed to kill it. He put Armor of Contempt on, and it survived. And as a result, I think he had the bottom of the turn, so he was able to then jump on and get that massive primary at the end of the game, which is where he was able to get, that extra 10 points, which was enough to put him up 2 points ahead of me. But yeah, really interesting game. The Dark Angels matchup is absolutely brutal. It's a really, really hard matchup. I think if I played it again, I could potentially win it, but it's a very hard one. It's not one that I'd go into confident ever. And Dylan's an absolute legend of a player as well. Very, very competent. He knows what he's doing. He's very talented. So when you've got a talented person, a competent person on a list that has an advantage into you, sometimes you've just got to accept that you're probably going to lose. But this also sort of highlights one of the things that this list was designed around, is that even when it does lose, it's fucking close. All it takes is a little bit of a spike on your 4-up invulnerable saves on your Terminators, and you can flip the game into a win. And if you're playing this in a teams environment, it's like your losses are a 75-77. That's fine. That's in WTC. That's a draw. And if you can get a draw into their Dark Angels, that's really, really good. So the list performed well, but Dylan performed weller. So yeah, that was round 4. Alrighty guys, let's talk about round 5, where I played Kyle McKenzie and his Drukhari. Really, really interesting list. This was actually my first time playing against Kyle. He was an absolutely lovely opponent. I had an absolutely fantastic time. We even actually decided to go out, a group of us, and I invited Kyle to come out with us for dinner after the event, because we hit it off like a house on fire. So yeah, really cool bloke. I really enjoyed my game with Kyle. But let's have a look at his list. So he had Drukhari with the Sky Splinter Assault, and he had an Archon with Spiteful Raider. He had a second Archon with Nightmare Shroud. He had 3 units of Beastmasters, with all the different weird and wonderful creatures that are the Drukhari. He then had Lilith. He had 2 units of Cabalites, which he would use Venoms to split into smaller 5-man units. Then he had a unit of Witches that he would also use a Venom to split into smaller 5-man units. And then he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Venoms. And these guys are really, really good because he can sticky the objectives with those Cabalites from inside. And then also at the end of the fight phase, if those Cabalites are not in engagement range and are within 6 inches of the Venom, they can jump back in. So that's a really, really neat trick that he was using quite well. He had Kronos as well for those extra pain tokens. He had 2 units of Incubi, that's where the Archons went. And then he had 3 units of Mandrakes and 2 units of Scourges, one with Lancers and one with Haywire Blasters. So really, really cool list. Lots of MSU, a ridiculous number of units, just so many bodies, so many moving pieces. Yeah, it was really, really cool list. And I was a little intimidated by it because I haven't played a great deal of games in Drukhari. I've played a couple and they all went my way, so I wasn't scared, so to speak. But I was just like, yeah, you never know. He might have some stratagem that I don't know about that just does absolutely amazing things, and who knows? When you're not familiar with a faction, you always go in with that little bit of a hesitation. But let's pull up the scores now and have a look at how the game went down. Alright, here's the scores into the Drukhari. So our mission was Scorched Earth, and the mission rule was Leadership, the one where you basically battle line units get like reroll leadership checks or something. Kyle got 79 points into my 97. So another strong win for the World Eaters. You can see here that I maxed out my primary with 50 points, and I nearly maxed out my secondaries, getting minimum of 5 points per battle round, which is a pretty good target to aim for. Whereas Kyle, he got 30 primary, so he didn't quite get the primary that he needed. However, he did almost max his secondaries as well. So one of the things about the Drukhari list is because it has so many units, it's almost always going to max its secondaries because it can go send things for behind enemy lines whilst doing containment, and it doesn't really care that it's just taken 4 of its units off the board, 4 of the units out of the game, out of the fight, because it's got so many units that can go and do the fight. And as a result, they're almost always going to max their secondaries. So the key that I find when versing armies like Drukhari is you need to make sure that you win the battle for the primary, because they're going to win the battle for the secondaries. So you need to make sure that you're sandbagging objectives to the point where they can't get on them, and you're going to score those points. And the second they hop on an objective, you need to make sure, like, you risk everything. Take them off the objective. You have to kill them off the objective. Otherwise, they're going to end up winning the game. So here's the map that we played. So it was Crucible of Battle, the deployment on this one. And in this one, I was terrified that he was going to use his MSU to spread out all over the board and prevent me from ever deep striking where I wanted to. So what I did is I put 2 units of Terminators on the board and only put a single one in deep strike. I had, in behind this ruin here, I had Khan's Rhino and a unit of Terminators and a unit of 5 Berserkers. And then I also had a unit of Jackals sort of stringing out behind it, but tucked in there as well. And the idea here is you basically want to go cool. You got like a single file line of Jackals on the inside of the wall there, then a single file unit of Khorne Berserkers, then a Rhino, and then Terminators. And the idea there is you're basically making it so that from this corner here, you could send out Jackals, or Berserkers, or the Rhino Berserkers, or the Terminators. So you basically want to make sure every model is as close to that corner as possible. Whereas if you just put a big brick of Terminators in there, well, now your 5-man Berserkers are like over here somewhere, and they're way further away from that objective. So that's what I did there. As I sandbagged that, and then basically my game plan was to basically control this one, and then keep playing denial on that one. He sent his beast packs out early to do damage to me, and he used his mandrakes to screen me from my scout moves, which I actually think is often a mistake into World Eaters. People feel like that's the obvious thing to do, is to use your mandrakes so that the World Eaters player can't scout and charge you turn 1. However, particularly the Terminator list, I don't really want to be charging you turn 1, because if I charge you turn 1, and then now I've got a unit in your face, you can turn your whole army on it, kill it, and that's a problem. I want to be waiting until like turn 2 or 3 when I've powered up, I've got a bunch of command points, I'm able to rapid ingress and send out units that advance and charge and overwhelm. I don't want to be going, cool, here's 8-bound first turn, then next turn here's some Terminators, then the following turn here's some more Terminators. I want to say here's everything at once. So as a result, basically he baited me, he reverse baited me, where he put out his mandrakes to screen me, and I was able to go, cool, the Berserkers that are in here, they charge those mandrakes and kill them. The Jackals that are in here, they charge those mandrakes and kill them. The Jackals that were down here, they charge those mandrakes and kill them. You know, that sort of thing. There was one real pivotal moment in this game where basically he had a whole bunch of like Venoms along here in like an arc, basically staying outside of my charge range of a lot of stuff. But he wildly underestimated how fast Khan's unit is. And basically Khan's unit deployed here in my first turn, it moved up essentially into this nook here, and sat in there whilst everything else was getting into the fight. And then in his turn, he basically like pushed me off of this objective, pushed down here, kept himself what he thought was safe. And then in my turn, I've just gone, yep, +2 move, advance and charge, and I've sent Khan's unit out, hit all of his Venoms, and I killed like 4 Venoms in a single turn with Khan's unit. With +1 to wound, re-rolling 1s to hit and wound, just killed all the Venoms, right? So now he's got all of these combat units disembarked, and then when I killed one of those Venoms, I spent a CP to turn on 4+ fights on death. So now I'm like, cool, if you send Lilith's unit in to kill those Berserkers, you're probably going to lose Lilith's unit in return. You know, if you send in the Archon's unit, you're probably going to lose that in return. So I really put him in a hard spot where I was like, well, if he tries to shoot the Berserkers, they're just going to blood surge into him. If he tries to fight them, they're going to fight on death and probably kill him anyway. But if he leaves them, there's a fucking unit of 10 Terminators in his deployment zone that are going to mess him up. So it was a really hard problem for him to solve. He did come up with a really clever plan where basically he took 3 Cabalites that had disembarked from one of those Venoms, and he charged them to base contact Khan. And then because the unit was so strung out and long, because it had hit so many different Venoms, he then basically took his Witch's unit and his Incubi and charged the one end. And that end was so far away from Khan that if they fought and wiped the unit, all of the stuff trailing down here wouldn't have been able to fight because they were so far away from enemy units. That was his plan. However, the mistake that he made was when he fought first with Lilith's unit, he killed like, 6 or so Berserkers. So all I did was remove all of the ones from this area so that the next closest model to him was Khan. And then a couple of those fought back, killed a couple of witches, and then he's now in a position where with those Incubi, if he wants to fight with them, he has to pile into Khan and hit Khan, and then when Khan dies, Khan will fight on death and pick up all the Incubi. Whereas he was hoping that Lilith's unit was going to kill enough so that Khan would die on that activation and then have to fight those Cabalites. But because of where I removed casualties from, he was then put in a position where he either had to not fight with the Incubi, in which case Khan's unit picks up the Cabalites, then it ticks over into my turn, and then Khan's unit is free to go and charge something, so he can't have that. But if he piles the Incubi in, and then Khan fights on death, Khan's going to fight and kill all of those Incubi, which is exactly what happened. So that meant that Khan killed all of them. That was really good. But essentially, that was one real pivotal moment in the game. The other thing that was really worth noting in this game is that he killed, over the entire course of the game, I think he killed 3 Terminators. So because Khan was able to go in and do that damage and basically destroyed almost all of Lilith's unit and one of the Incubi units, and I was picking up all of his Cabalites and his Beast Packs pretty easily, when I sent out the Terminators, I just had Terminators on this objective, Terminators on that objective, and Terminators on that objective, and there was nothing he could do. He'd send Incubi in, and I'd just put -1 damage on. He'd kill like 1 or 2 Terminators, and then I'd just kill them all in return. And anytime he tried to send anything else in to do shooting damage, he was just doing no damage because I'm sitting there in cover, you know, getting good saves. And then the damage output on my units was so high that I was just poleaxing him. So he essentially then pivoted into just focusing on his secondaries. So he was sending things down to get behind enemy lines. He was sending things out to get containment. He was sending things out to get, you know, engage on all fronts. And he was just focusing on his secondaries, which did turn out to be quite a good strategy for him because it made the game much closer than it looked. Like, if you walked past the table at any point, you would have been like, holy crap, where's all the Drukhari? All I'm seeing is Terminators all over the board, you know? It looked like I was absolutely destroying him, and in terms of the fight, I was. However, if you look at the scores, it was a 97-79. There's only 18 points difference between us, so it's actually not that big of a win, even though when you looked at the board, it was like, wow, all the Drukhari are dead. So, yeah, ultimately, really, really happy with that outcome. Really happy with those results. And the game was an absolute ripper. It was a ton of fun. And yeah, I look forward to playing Kyle at the next event that I attend. Hopefully we get paired into each other. But that finishes out round 5. Alrighty, here we have round 6. I'm playing into Liam Stevens and his Leagues of Votann. So let's talk about Liam's list. He had an Einir champion, he had a Carl with Wayfarer's Grace on the champion, and on the Carl was Grim Demeanor. Then he had a unit of 10 Hearthkin warriors. He uses a transport to split these into 2 units of 5. Then he had 4 Sagittars. And then he had 3 units of 5 Berserks. So basically in one Sagittar he had 5 warriors on the board, and then the other Sagittars full of Berserks. Then he had a unit of 5 Hearthguard, which are the Votann Terminators. And then he had a unit of 10 Hearthguard, which are the big unit of Terminators. Then he had a Hecaton Land Fortress, that's where the 5 Terminators went. And then the 10 Terminators go in Deep Strike. And then he rounds the list out with 3 units. 2 units of the Pioneers, and 1 unit of the Jaegers. So a really, really cool list. This game was actually played on stream. So I'll chuck links in the description where you can watch that. And I'm also planning to do a video where I basically clip that battle report, clip that live stream down into a more digestible chunk with my commentary over the top, so that you don't have to sit there and watch through a full, 3.5 hour game to get the cliff notes. But yeah, that's Liam's list. Let's have a look at the scoreboard. Alrighty guys, so let's have a look at the scores. You can see it was a 96-80, so a big win for the World Eaters. The World Eaters Terminators go really, really well into the Leagues of Votann. As you can see, I maxed out my primary, and I almost maxed out my secondaries, just dropping 4 points there. So really, really strong ability to score my victory points. That being said, Liam also had a very strong ability to score his. You can see he scored 30 of his 50 primary, but he scored all 40 of his secondaries. So even though I scored that massive 96, he was right on my tail, and he was on my tail almost the entire game. As you can see, there was lots of rounds where I was scoring relatively small and he was scoring decent on his secondaries, to the point where it was actually a really, really close game. And like I said, this was one of the games that was on stream, so if you want to check the full stream out, I'll chuck links to the description, and I'm also planning to cut it up into a smaller, more digestible video with my commentary so that we can break down that game in detail. So what I'll do now is I'll jump over to the deployment, and I'll show you guys how it sort of all went down. So this was the map that we played on, and basically what I did in this situation was I deployed 1 unit of Terminators and I had 2 in Deep Strike. So I had 1 unit deployed here with Rhino and Jackals and Berserkers and all that sort of stuff. And the idea here is basically you want a single file line of Jackals against the wall there, then a single file line of Berserkers, then you put a Rhino, and then you put the 10 Terminators. And you can more or less fit all of that in there. Some of the Terminators and Jackals have to spill out here behind. But you can more or less fit all of that, and the reason you want to do that is because you want them, all of those units, hard up against that wall. So if you run them in single file back like that, you can end up getting them all hard up against there, and that way, depending on what your opponent does, you can send out the appropriate unit. So in this game, I basically did that. He put his Jaegers on this central objective, so I sent my Berserkers, because I knew that the Berserkers would wipe out that Jaeger unit, whereas Jackals might not. So I was able to send the Berserkers out, kill those Jaegers, then basically we had a little bit of a trade on these outer objectives. One of the main swings in this matchup was that he has that big unit of 10 Terminators that has ignore modifiers. That's a massive problem for me. If he rapid ingresses them outside of 12 inches and I can't charge them, I'm not going to be able to kill them, and then it's going to tick over to his turn, and he's going to be able to move in, hit me with those Terminators, and they will wipe out one of my Terminator units with no sweat, right? So that's a problem for me. However, in this game, basically I sent some stuff out, and then basically I had these Terminators positioned sort of, on this objective here, the first unit that I deployed. The other two units are in deep strike, and then in his second turn, he actually deep struck his Terminator unit here so that it could see mine. And I think his plan was to just shoot that unit till it was more or less dead, and then that small enough unit wouldn't be able to respond. But the second he deep strike there, I just rapid ingressed one of the units that I had held back into my own deployment zone. So now, sure, he shot and killed most of that unit, but then I was able to jump out with my 10 Terminators and the unit of 8 bound that were hiding in this ruin here, and picked up that entire unit of 10 Terminators through his Armor of Contempt. And as a result, he lost that unit of 10 Terminators, and he didn't even successfully trade it for one of mine. And as a result, now I've got a small unit of Terminators here that just kept jumping out and shooting things off of the center, because I still had the 2 autocannons and 4 guys with combi weapons, so the shooting of the unit wasn't really hindered too much. And they basically just come out, shot berserks off the central objective. I had Jackals that were able to keep jumping on that central objective, which is how I was able to deny Liam his primary. And then the unit of Terminators that dropped here started moving over this way, getting into combat with the Sagittars, etc. And then the other unit of Terminators was able to drop eventually back in this corner here, and went for a charge into Sagittars, the Bikes, the Pioneers, etc. Pretty much the whole time Liam had his fortress sitting right here, and the reason he did that is because it's got good firing lines across a lot of the board. If it's sitting in this terrain, so that terrain doesn't block its line of sight, it could see lots of places. And I think he was planning to just overwatch me the second I walked onto that objective. But I just kept staying 24 inches away from him so he couldn't overwatch me, and I kept just shooting things off the objective. And I think a lot of people underestimate the shooting capacity of those World Eaters Terminators, so that was really, really good. If Liam had played with that land fortress way more aggressively, and if he had played with his Terminators more reactively, he could have made this a much, much harder game for me. However, unfortunately for Liam, he threw away his Terminators too cheaply. He basically dropped them and they didn't kill a Terminator unit, and then I picked him up in response. So that was a bad trade, and he didn't get the value that you need to get out of something like a land fortress. They're too expensive to just sit on a backfield objective and not realistically contribute to the game. He should have shoved that thing right into the center and forced me to engage with it, because that thing's tough as. If it puts Armor of Contempt on, I'm not going to kill it. Like, it's going to take me 2 or 3 turns to kill it, right? And I don't have 2 or 3 turns to deal with it. I've got too much stuff to do. So he should have sent that in and done that, and that would have made the game much, much more challenging, but I guess he didn't see that opportunity. So he just sort of sat it there and sent out the Sagittars, the Berserks, and the Terminators to do all of the work, and I was able to basically pick up all of those elements, which allowed me to continue to score all of my primary, because I basically was just pushing him off the primary and he wasn't successfully pushing me off. And I had bottom of the turn as well, which is obviously really, really good for World Eaters. I'm able to get those big 15-point primary turns, which is how I was able to max that primary. So yeah, absolutely ripper of a game. Liam was a fantastic opponent. But unfortunately for him, he missed out on a few opportunities there that could have really helped him out. We played a bunch of practice games into Votann, and I played against Votann at WTC, so I was pretty confident in the matchup. I knew what I needed to do, but I also knew that if he wielded his components in his list like to full effect, it was going to be a very difficult game. So I was confident, I understood the matchup, but I wasn't confident in terms of, being certain I was going to win. I was like, this could be really hairy, but I was confident as long as I stuck to the plan, we were going to be fine. And that's more or less what happened in the end. So overall, fantastic result, and that's my 6th round completed. Alrighty guys, here we go into round 7. I'm going up against Adepta Sororitas again. This time, however, it is the Bringers of Flame, and it's also piloted by a good friend of mine and fellow Team Australia member, Reese Cunningham. He's arguably the best player in Victoria right now. He's absolutely peaking. He's firing on all pistons. He did fantastic at WTC running the Sisters of Battle. Reese and I had played a ton of practice games, and I was unable to win any of them. So I knew that this was a bad matchup for me. I knew that Reese knew exactly what he needed to do to put the hurt on me. But now we're playing at a tournament. It's 1v1, and we're going to test our mettle. This wasn't a practice game. This was a serious game of 40k, and there were a few moments in this that were really quite interesting and reflective of that. However, first, let's just have a quick look at Reese's list, just to speed you guys up. So he had Bringers of Flame, Morven Val, he had Saint Celestine, 2 Immolators, both with multi-melters. He had 3 Castigators, 2 of which with battle cannons, 1 with autocannons. Then he had 2 Dominion squads. Now, these are a 10-man squad, but he uses the Immolators to split them into units of 5. And these are really good because they give Scout to the Immolators, and they also have reactive moves. A real pain in the ass of a unit to deal with. Then he had 2 Exorcists. This was a new piece of tech that he hadn't wielded before, so it was interesting to see how that was going to pan out in this matchup. And then he rounded it out with the Paragon Warsuits for Morven to join, and a unit of Seraphim for doing actions and achieving his missions. So that was Reese's list. So it was a slight adaptation from what he'd ran in the past, but it still had a lot of familiar elements and a lot of elements that I'm not comfortable versing. Those Castigators are a huge problem for Terminators. Morven Val's a huge problem for Terminators, and those Dominions with the Scout moves and reactive moves are also a huge problem for World Eaters because they can do a lot of really annoying stuff, blocking your movement, that sort of stuff, reactively moving away from objectives so that you don't get to kill them on objectives. There's all kinds of crazy things they can do. But let's have a quick look at the scores now. So this is the scores in front of us here. So the mission was Terraform, and the mission rule was Swift Action. And as you can see, the scores was an 82 to me, 87 to Reese. So a very close game. WTC World, this would have been a draw, and it was quite interesting. So as you can see, I was dominating Reese on the primary. I got all 50 of my primary points, whereas he only got 38 of his. And this was largely facilitated by the fact that once I'd removed his Paragons, Celestine, and his Dominions, he basically just had tanks into Terminators, which is all well and good in terms of damage dealing, but it was very difficult for him to take those objectives off of me. So that's where that sort of came out. However, as you can see, he absolutely cleaned house when it came to his secondaries. He was just scoring every secondary card he drew, whereas I was really struggling with those secondaries. There was plenty of turns where I was only getting one of my cards and I was having to discard the second card, and I was just like, I can't afford to just keep discarding these. I'm not scoring enough points. But more or less, throughout the course of the game, it was relatively close. He was in front the whole time, but at any time it could flip. So let's have a look at the map that we played. So we played Hammer and Anvil again. Basically what I did is I deployed Khan in his Rhino here, Terminators here, and I put 2 units of Terminators in reserves so that I could rapid ingress them and then charge him. And then Reese got the first turn, and unlucky for me, first turn his Exorcists popped Khan's Rhino. And even though he couldn't see it, it was out of line of sight shooting, he popped that Rhino, which is a huge problem because Khan starts killing his own guys if he's just left out in the open. So I needed to now send Khan in to get stuck in already. And he basically sent out just Dominions onto these middle objectives. Tanks are all the way back here where I can't touch them. And I'm all the way back here. And I'm like, in order for me to kill those Dominions, I have to send things out into the open. If I send things out into the open, he can just kill me, right? So I basically overwhelmed him, and I just sent out everything at once. He was able to respond by using Morven and some Cascaders to wipe out one unit of Terminators, and then the other Cascaders to cripple the other, and then stay out of range of the third, and then do that again. So it basically took him 2 turns to pick up the vast majority of those Terminators. Khan's unit actually did some really good work. There was one point there where after turn 1, when he's blown up my Rhino that had Khan down here, I basically moved Khan into this nook here. I had some Jackals and stuff in here and some 8-bound in here. So I had like a little group of things here where basically I was saying I'm going to control this objective for the entire game and this objective for the entire game. And then we're going to fight over these 3. And my plan was to let him have that one, but basically try to continually deny him these 2. And if I could do that, I would end up outscoring him on the primary, which is what happened, and that plan did work. The problem with that plan was I ran out of pieces to score my secondaries, and because I'd positioned myself down here, when I got things like containment, it was really hard for me to get that victory point because I had to get outside of my deployment zone within 9 inches of 2 different table edges. So I could be outside of my deployment zone within 9 inches of this edge, but I couldn't really get to that edge or this edge, which made it really hard. Just things like that. But there was, so basically turn 1, blew up my Rhino. I've then jumped out into the open here. Then in his turn, he sent Celestine in, and he was going to charge and precision out Khan, was his plan, right? So he's moved Celestine right up next to Khan. Then he started his shooting phase, and he's fired one of his Exorcists into the Berserkers. He killed one, and then a Blood Surge moved into Celestine. And now this is something where, you know, if it was a practice game, or if it was somebody who was less familiar with the list, I may have warned them about that. But with Reese, it's like me and Reese have played literally dozens of games with this faction. So I was like, I don't feel like he needs to be reminded. He should know better. So I was like, yep, Blood Surging in. Rolled like a 4 for the Blood Surge and went in and tagged it. And this is also a good point to mention that the change to Blood Surge move, where it's only once per phase, isn't really that big of a deal. Because most of the time when Blood Surge really does change the outcome of a game, it's because your opponent forgot that you had it. It's not because you were able to Blood Surge 3 times in one phase and fly across the board. That can be amazing, but generally speaking, if they shoot you and you Blood Surge once, they don't shoot you again. They don't shoot you a second time because they're like, oh shit, I forgot about Blood Surge, and then all of a sudden they're like, I'm not shooting him again. No way, I don't want to get Blood Surged into. So often if you don't connect with the first Blood Surge, you don't get an opportunity to make a second. So it's not that big of a deal that we lost that second Blood Surge. But basically, Blood Surged in. I've then used, because I get to fight first because technically it's an ongoing combat, and it's his turn. So I've Blood Surged in, so I've spent a CP to get +1 to wound, even though because the Berserkers didn't make a charge this phase, they don't get the +1 strength and attack, which means they're all strength 5, which means they're not wounding on 2s, and I desperately wanted this Celestine's unit to die, because if it got to fight and precision out Khan, now I'm in a world of hurt. So I've fought with him with +1 to wound on, he's put Armor of Contempt on, and I killed one of the Gemini, and nearly killed Celestine, but didn't quite get her. And I'm like, oh no, now he's going to kill Khan. Khan's already fought, so Khan can't fight on death. This is a disaster. Even though it was a disaster for him that I Blood Surged into him, it was now looking like it was going to be a disaster for me because I failed to kill him. So he's then spent the command points, he's precisioned Khan, and failed to kill Khan. And I'm like, yes, I'm back in it. So now Khan's still alive, Celestine's still alive. This big epic moment where we thought at multiple times we both thought that we'd fucked the other one. Nothing ended up happening. So it was really interesting, that one. Oh, where have I gone? I've lost it. So we're down here. We've got this combat happening, and then basically I ended up falling back with Khan's unit, which I know that's heresy, but fell back with Khan's unit and then moved the unit of Terminators that were here jumped out, they shot Celestine and then charged Celestine and used that charge to get on these two objectives, which was able to deny Reese a turn of primary. And that same turn that I sent those Terminators out, I actually just deep struck a unit of Terminators 9 inches away and went for a 9-inch charge, and then sent in some Terminators that I'd rapid ingressed as well. So basically now all the Terminators and Khan's unit are all out in the open now, and it's on like Donkey Kong. And basically he was just absolutely ripping me apart, to the point where he also picked up like all of my Jackals, my 5-man Berserkers. He knew that if he removed those, he would remove my ability to score secondaries, which was very, very effective. And it ended up in quite the tight game on our 7th round, with only 5 points between the winner and the loser. So again, in WTC world, this is effectively a draw. Very, very close game. And yeah, Reese is an absolute legend. He obviously was the champion that ended up going on to win the event. So when one of your losses is against the guy who won the event, you can't really beat yourself up too much. But yeah, really, really close game. Really, really intense. And a lot of fun. Reese is one of my best mates, so we had a really fun game. We went and had a drink afterwards. We were actually, because we'd played the matchup so often, we were powering through it so fast that we actually, halfway through, we went and got a beer and just sat outside, and he had a smoke and sank some drinks, and then we went back in and finished off the game, because we were like, well, we're looking at it and we're like, we're already on battle round 4. We're looking at the time, there's still like an hour and a half in the round, and everybody else is on battle round 2. And we're like, yeah, let's go just relax for a bit, because we know how this is going to go. We're really, really tight, really, really close. So yeah, fantastic round. The Sisters matchup is one that the World Eaters definitely do not want, especially when you're running the Terminators, but any World Eaters realistically, because if you're running a lot of 8-bound, those Castigators are still very, very good into 8-bound. So yeah, over and all, great game, great mission, and yeah, that's round 7 done and dusted. Alrighty guys, here we have the final round. This was into Ben Cobra, and this game was also streamed on the Risky Rollers live channel. So if you want to check out the entire game, I'll put links in the description. And just like with my Votann game, I'm planning to clip that together into a smaller, more digestible review of the game with my commentary for those of you who don't have 3 hours to sit there and watch somebody else play Warhammer. Yeah, absolutely fantastic game with Ben on the stream. So he was running the Tyranids, and he was running Invasion Fleet, which is very interesting. So he had a Tervigon, he had a Winged Hive Tyrant. That Winged Hive Tyrant has an ability where it can pick an enemy unit and make them -1 attack, which is a really big problem for World Eaters. He had a unit of 10 Hormagaunts, then he had 3 units of 20 Termagaunts, and 1 unit of 10 Termagaunts, so lots and lots of little bugs. And then he backs that up with a Biovore, 2 Exocrines, which are essentially Tyranid fucking Castigators. Like, they're 3 damage shooting, good blast weapons. So yeah, 2 Exocrines, 2 Lictors, a Neuralictor. Then he had 2 Tyrannifexes, or Tyrannify? What's the plural of Tyrannifex? Tyrannify. And then he also had a unit of 3 Venomthropes. So really, really interesting list. The last time I'd played Tyranids, I got absolutely dumpstered by them. And that was at WTC. So I was a bit nervous going into this. And Ben Cobra is also one of the Victorian representative players for the Australian Team Championships. He's one of the strongest players in the state. He's also a good friend of mine. We've played a bunch of practice games in the past. So I knew that this game was not going to be easy. And we were essentially playing off for podium positions. So there was a lot going on, a lot riding on this game. So I was very keen to bring my A game and see what I could do into Ben's Tyranids. So let's have a look at how the scores panned out. Alright, so this is round 8, Tyranids. The mission was Linchpin, and the mission rule was Fog of War. So the end score was a 78 to 74. So this was actually my lowest scoring game, if I remember correctly. But I did still get the win and pipped him out by 4 points, and it all came down to a combat in the bottom of turn 5. It was the very last dice that needed to be rolled, and every single point of the game really mattered. So it was a really intense game in that regard. Was relatively casual in that me and Ben are mates, and we were just sort of playing pretty fast and loose and that sort of stuff, but it was intense in the way that it was just like every dice roll mattered, every draw of the secondary mattered. So as you can see here, I got 32 primary, he got 37 primary, so we were relatively close in our primary scores on Linchpin, but I got 36 of my secondaries, whereas he only got 27. So it really did come down to my army having a greater capacity than his to achieve secondaries. That's what won the game. Because we were both sort of playing cagey with the primary. I was going second, so I knew that I was going to be able to get a big primary at the tail end of the game, so I didn't overextend. I didn't want to stretch myself too thin too early. But that did allow him to get a really strong foothold at the start of the game. But, it all sort of came out in the wash. But realistically, my ability to focus on my primary cards was really, really critical. So this is the map that we played on. So we played on the Tipping Point map. And basically, he put one of his Exocrines in reserves. And then he had like a Tyrannifex somewhere here and here. And then an Exocrines somewhere here and here. And then basically, he was trying to create these firing lines with his Exocrines so that wherever my Terminators went, I was going to get blasted. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I deployed 2 units of Terminators here. I'm just trying to remember if I... no, I deployed 1 and deep struck 2. Because I remember I ended up having to deep strike into my own deployment zone, which I hate doing. But basically, the way that this panned out, the challenge with this matchup for the World Eaters is that the units that he throws out early aren't easy to kill. So normally what happens is people throw out like scouts or cultists or, Jaegers, or they'll throw out, something small and easily digestible that I can go, cool, I'm going to send 5 Berserkers and they'll kill it, or I'll send 10 Jackals and they'll kill it, or I'll just out-OC you. Whereas what he was doing is he was sending out 20 freaking Gaunts, and it's like you can't just send 5 Berserkers to kill that. But at the same time, I don't want to send Khan's unit out, kill that unit at 20, and then lose Khan's unit in response, and then he just reloads with another unit at 20. Like, I can't just keep that trade up. So it was really, really, really concerning. To the point where he was sort of pushing out. He was controlling this objective for most of the game and this objective for most of the game. I was controlling this one and this one, and then we're sort of fighting back and forth for the center. The one of the challenges was he didn't have much combat in his list. And as a result, when I had some Jackals hiding behind this wall, and because he'd pushed around that way, he wasn't able to get angles on those Jackals, and he didn't have anything that could just run up this side and punch the Jackals to death. And as a result, I kind of just had that objective for free the entire game, which really sucked for him. But inversely, he was able to put 10 Gaunts on there and then just send out 20 Gaunts in a big arc and then send out big monsters and stuff like that. And it was like, I couldn't get to that objective either. So it was really, really tight in that regard. Neither of us could really break the other one's formation. But on turn 3, I think it was, I basically deep strike, rapid ingress, sent all the Terminators in. There was one point where I had a Terminator unit deployed behind here. I must have deployed 2 then. It must have been 1 deployed behind there and 1 deployed behind there. But either way, the one that was deployed behind here, I just moved them out. And I couldn't advance and charge all game because he had Biovores, and basically they create a spore mine, and you can't end an advance move within 9 inches, I think it is, of a spore mine. So as a result, I was just taking +2 move and feel no pain the entire game. And I'd basically move out from here 7 inches, but then it's like a 10-inch charge to get onto the thing that I need. So I'm like, okay, cool, failed that charge, and I'm like, oh, those Terminators are free use now. They're just going to get absolutely blasted by all the cannons that are down here. But knowing that I'd just exposed a Terminator unit, I was like, well, the plan there is to expose multiple. So that one comes out, and then I'd deep strike another one, and I'd rapid ingress another one, and I'm like, cool, here's all 30 Terminators. And when you do that, he then realizes, okay, cool, these two big beasts are going to fire into that unit down there, but the beast that's down here, it's going to fire to this unit, and the beast that's over here is going to fire into that unit, and as a result, he takes 2 or 3 out of each Terminator unit, which is actually good for Terminators, because now they get +1 to hit, which means they're going in and they're shooting it more accurately and fighting more accurately. And then basically the way it ended up was these Terminators that eventually came out from here ended up getting in punch-on with an Exocrine over here. Khan's unit came out and got stuck into a Tervagon there. They ended up killing it just, so I got it down to like 2 wounds left, and then it fell back and died to a desperate escape. Then Khan's unit got charged by some lictors and stuff, which they killed, but then Khan fought on death and killed them. So we had a big blowout there. Terminators cleaned up all the gaunts. And then it all basically boiled down to an assassinate on the last turn. He had whatever the Tyranid bug is that spawns things. I'm terrible with names. But yeah, the one that spawns more gaunts, because the way his list is designed to work is basically if you don't kill one of the units, if you kill it down to like 3 or 4 gaunts left, he can essentially spawn the whole unit back to full strength. So I was basically just going, cool, I'm just going to make sure the Terminators go in and just gank the whole unit. Don't soften them up, just kill them. And then he can't ever resurrect, was the plan. But it all came down to the big spawning bug here. And it was, if I killed it, it was going to be an assassinate point, which would get me the win. But if I failed to kill it, he was going to get the win. And that was in the last moment of the 5th battle round. And as you can see by the scores, I managed to get that kill and managed to bring home the win. So, yeah, what were some other notable moments in that game? I think one of the most notable things for me was that even though he had all these 3 damage weapons and all of these abilities to screen me out with all these billions of bodies, his damage profile just wasn't enough to kill 30 Terminators. It's all well and good to think, well, you've got 3 guys, all of which have 3 damage shooting. That's good into Terminators, but that's enough to kill 1 unit of Terminators, but it's not enough to kill 3. And if you don't kill all 3 in one turn, it can be a real big problem for you. You need to be able to kill at least 1 and then neutralize another and hide from the 3rd. If you can't do that, the World Eaters Terminators are going to run through you. Either that or you need to be able to survive their punch into you, which is where the Dark Angels come in. But yeah, so that's more or less how that game panned out. Absolutely fantastic game. It came right down to the wire, and like I said, it was on stream, so I'll post links for that if you guys want to watch it. But that's effectively how it went down, is you basically deployed Terminators hidden so that he can't shoot me. I keep trading on the small objectives, and then on one turn I just overwhelm. I send out Terminators down here, Terminators into the middle, Terminators from Deep Strike over here, and I just go, cool, eat 30 Terminators, and not many people have the capacity to do it. And that more or less rounds out the 8th and final round of the Risky Rollers Open. Alrighty guys, that rounds out the Risky Rollers Open for 2024, where I went 6 wins, 2 losses with the 30 Terminator World Leaders list. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, let me know what you thought of the format, where I'm talking about the lists, then talking about the scores, then talking about the maps and the terrain and the layouts and all that sort of stuff. Because I'm looking to make sure that the quality of this content is as high as I can realistically achieve with my limited capacity to manage this technology. I'm a bit of a boomer, so it takes me a while to figure this shit out. But I think I'm getting there, and I think I'm getting a little bit better with each iteration. So let me know what you guys think, and we'll take it from there, and we'll continue to develop and grow this channel together. Speaking of growing this channel, I just want to say a really quick and super massive thank you to all of those who support the channel on Patreon. I've recently got new monitors and new cameras so that I can make sure that this content is as efficiently produced as possible so that I can produce more of it for you guys. Whereas if it's difficult to produce, and then all of a sudden I have to set aside all of this time that I don't have because I also have to work a full-time job with family commitments and stuff, it makes it really, really hard. So you guys supporting me is allowing me to increase the efficiency in which I can create content, which therefore means I'm going to be able to create more content. And for that, I really do appreciate it, and I really wanted to say thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. If you want to join, you can support over there. It also gains you access to a Discord server where we talk tactics, strategies, army lists, all sorts of really cool stuff going on there. There's a Ripper community. We also share hobby updates, and we share memes, and it's a lot of fun in there. So if you want to join that Discord community, head over to Patreon and show your support. And if you want to pick up some swag like this shirt here, we've got neoprene gaming mats, we've got objective markers, we've got terrain kits, we've got dice, we've got all kinds of cool swag and all kinds of cool bits and pieces over on blogforthebloodgod.com. So you can find all the information there. It's also all in the description of this video. So if you want to show your support in a way where you get some swag back in return, that's also very much appreciated. So with that being said, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.